to Future Felix, and you know what that means. That means we have another special announcement. I'm very excited to announce we have our first ever MP coming on the podcast for an interview. We have Sarah Olney, who's a Liberal Democrat member of Parliament, as well as the energy and business spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats. That will be coming out on the 15th of February, so make sure you're subscribed for that, as well as on the 1st of February. We have Monica Harding interview coming out, so I'm very excited for both of those. 2 interviews in 3 weeks. You better be excited for that. Now enjoy the episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Politics Relax Podcast. Today, joining me in the order that I see them are Felix, Rajan, as we've just learned, Jose, Piers, Daniel, Lily, and Cameron. And some things have happened this week. At the time of filming, Joe Biden has made 21 new presidential decrees, including overturns on Donald Trump's former degrees, I guess you could say. But we're going to start off with the new study, which I think it was yesterday that it was uncovered, about some new info on the COVID double dose vaccine. The UK has gone for the strategy of giving as many people as possible the double dose, but a new study from Israel has shown that it's only 30% effective. So who wants to start off on that? Yeah, Felix.
I've been very supportive of the vaccine on here every time, and I'm still supportive of it. But I think we might need to rethink our strategy, because currently we're giving like 1 dose to as many people as possible instead of giving them 2 doses. But in Israel, which have the highest total vaccinated people, they've discovered that it could only be 30% effective, the 1 dose of vaccine and not 2. So it's quite disappointing from the government, because it should be 2 weeks. That's what Pfizer have recommended. It is 2 weeks, so that you can get the strongest possible vaccine, because we want to keep out, especially with the new variants coming. We don't know if some of them could be resistant to the vaccine, so we need to make sure these are 98%, which is the 2 dose, not 30%, which is very dangerous, especially for doctors working on the front line when we're at such a high peak.
Yeah, I think I mainly agree. Like, I'm no scientist, I haven't really done much research, so I'm not sure if the effects somewhat wear off or the resistance wears off if you don't get 2 doses within a set amount of time. But yeah, I think that's pretty fair point to raise. Jose, have you got anything to say about that?
Well, I just want to say, I think on one perspective, if you vaccinate more people, it will be good. But also, if you have to think about it, UK's vaccinated a lot of people, and at this point, you've probably vaccinated most of the old people. So I think getting the second one, 30% is better than nothing, I guess. Also, just a point I want to bring up is that the Kent variant of coronavirus has been found to be 30 to 40% more deadly in certain cases. For someone who's sick in their 60s, the original coronavirus, you only had a 10 out of 1,000 chance of dying from it, but it's risen to 13 to 14 out of 1,000 in the Kent variant.
And yeah, that's something we have to take into consideration. And it would be ideal to get the vaccine out as quickly as possible, but we have to consider the logistics of it. Like, would it be financially possible?
Yeah, to defend the government's position on this, the scientists here in the UK have been fairly clear in the last few weeks that they believe that 1 dose of the vaccine and then a longer gap is actually sufficient. And I think this is therefore a question of trust. Do we trust our scientists more, or do we trust scientists in Israel more? And yes, the 30% figure is not a good figure. And if that's true, and if that is verified by our scientists here, I'm absolutely certain the government will adjust their strategy accordingly. But what we're seeing at the moment, the advice from our scientists here in the UK has not changed, and it remains that having a single dose and then a longer gap is actually going to be more effective. So I think we have to look at it from that perspective, and the perspective of what our scientists here in the UK are saying, and the fact that the government are actually listening and they're acting on exactly what has been.
Right. Okay, moving on now to the Priti Patel situation, where if I get my notes up in my extensive page, so some basic things. A video recording revealed the Home Secretary stating that she wished a border shutdown in late February of last year. Obviously, this is when the virus was in its really early stages in the UK, and most of the cases were in China. no full travel restrictions were imposed until June, and Keir Starmer approached Boris as to why he didn't take advice, and he responded saying that we currently have one of the best border securities, and that he accused Keir of, quote, looking backwards and sniping from the sidelines. You do now require a negative test, but by February 27th, when the shutdown was suggested, there were 500 cases in the UK, 80,000 globally, and 2,700 globally. And Chris Whitty at the time, he warned of the future rising cases, but Boris decided to play the long game. Okay, Daniel, do you want to start us off there?
If we look at America, they shut their borders right at the start to China and Europe, and they've got one of the highest cases in the world, and the highest deaths. And so I don't think shutting down the borders that early would have really made that much difference, in all honesty.
I'd like to just look at that and say it's not always to do with the borders. I think in USA, a lot of the reason why USA's cases are some of the worst in the world are due to the culture, the leadership by Trump, the mask, like, you know, in England, we have public figures, you know, promoting active mask wearing. However, in USA, Donald Trump and his men and women just not promoting mask wearing as much, and it works. Mask wearing works, and that was a culture in the USA. And actually, there was actually some great statistics on these. Democrat voters are less likely to get COVID than Republicans, and that's just a sign of culture. And you know, when you've got Republicans taking up almost half the nation, then you're going to get trouble.
I found So I found online that if 95% of people wore masks in the USA, they'd have saved 30,000 people.
That the statistic isn't particularly a nice one, and as an American, I hate to disagree with the statement that Rajan made. It's a culture. There are people that are slightly more extremistic, you could say. We've seen it, but the election took place, and there's change on the way, but it may be a bit too late considering it has the highest deaths in the world, I believe. And yeah, I think it's just a nice comment. And yeah, I think it's just the way that it's promoted there, and obviously with the change of the administrations, we should hopefully see a slight curve. Okay,
I'm back now.
Cameron, do you got anything to say?
Sure. Yeah. So once again, in the government's defence, when we're talking about closing the borders back in when this pandemic started, right? So I recall, and I have also looked for a quote on this, I promise, but I haven't found any because it was from nearly a year ago now. The scientists, Chris Whitty, Patrick Vallance, consistently said in the early months of this pandemic, and in fact afterwards, looking back, that closing the borders at an early stage wouldn't have affected the case rate. And I don't understand that personally scientifically at all. And I think Priti Patel, to be honest, was right on this one. I admire her a lot. I think she's a highly effective minister. And I think I definitely agree with her on this one. Closing the borders, I mean, it seems like an obvious thing to do. Perhaps the scientists are right, and there's a scientific reason why it doesn't make any sense. And definitely, if you don't close the borders, you're obviously going to have a much better. You're going to have your trade is going to continue. You're going to continue to have a strong economy, so your economy will do well out of keeping your borders open. But I feel as though Priti Patel was right on this, and it would have been a sensible idea to have closed the borders early on. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think without any research, I say this, so take it with a pinch of salt, but I think that we could have saved many, many more lives than we could have originally if we closed the borders early. I think some countries took that approach, but obviously Italy was one of the first affected in Europe, and we had, since it was around February, March time, that is a popular tourist destination, that region of Europe around that time of the year. And I think just closing the borders could have made a much bigger impact on the cases, on the deaths. Felix, do you want to go?
Yeah, so I was about to make a point saying, oh, I think that closing the borders was the right idea, but I've just got some modelling up from a public health researcher that says it wouldn't actually have made that much difference, but if you, at the start of the pandemic, if you blocked travellers coming in from China, then it would have made an 80% difference. So I think this has to be reviewed when we eventually get a public inquiry, which needs to happen. 100% sure that needs to happen because the government has made so many mistakes and they need to be held accountable to that. So when we go to that public inquiry, this has to be investigated thoroughly, because why did they ignore Priti Patel? She's the Home Secretary. And why did they undermine her when she said this? I absolutely dislike Priti Patel. She's a bully and she supports the death penalty, which is enough for me to not like her. But I think she might have been right on this one, but there has to be a reason there. Chris Whitty, Patrick Valentin, the Sage Advice Advisory Group have to be held accountable as well. And they have to provide valid reasoning as to why they didn't advise this, if it was Sage or if it was the government, I don't know. But we need to have a public inquiry and we need to find out why this didn't happen earlier.
Yeah, I think so. That Boris not taking his own Home Secretary's advice was a bit of a I want to try and get something right so I can make myself look good, because this was near post-election. This was quite recently, and I can understand if he probably would have turned it down if it was the shadow Home Secretary, but obviously it wasn't. It was his own, and I find that a bit of a self-centered move, I guess you could say, on his part. Jose.
Well, first, I just want to point out, what does that tell us about Boris himself? The fact that he didn't want to trust her. I mean, we just have to question that he's not trusting his own team in general. However, I want to say, I don't think it was correct to close the borders late February, maybe early March, but I definitely don't think early February, mainly because the cases were so low at that point that I don't want to say there was no point, but inevitably, I'm not going to back. I don't really have any facts on this. I did see this many months ago, but if you think about it, whether you closed the borders at the time, coronavirus was already in the UK and it would have spread regardless of if you had closed them. I still do think people are just going to disagree. I think Trump was not wrong to close the borders to China. I think he did it for a different reason as to why. I think he did it more as an ego booster, but I definitely do think he may have been correct to do it. The spread of coronavirus in the US was, down to people being idiots in masks. But I definitely don't think the borders are the main reason as to why coronavirus spread in the UK and around the world. I definitely think it was other reasons that they could have prevented it spreading more internally.
Yeah, I can see your reasons for thinking that. Obviously, if there were about 500 cases and they did a border shutdown, I think many people wouldn't cooperate. But it did come in early August, I believe. I think it was the 5th of August that the interview came out, that some MPs admitted their mistakes. And obviously, August was the eye of the storm, I guess you could say, for COVID. But yeah, it's again, I think it's more looking at hindsight. We're judging on hindsight, but obviously, Boris not taking his Home Secretary's advice did play a part, and he didn't have to completely shut down the borders, but like you said, he could have probably taken some harder restrictions, I guess you could say. Piers.
Yeah, I'm just going to be a bit self-centered for a bit and talk about what I think would be a good course of action. I think, because at the beginning of the pandemic, the whole question was not about the vaccine or it was about the tests. How many tests can you get? Are the tests good enough? And at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a shortage of tests. So, but after about a month or so, they became much more readily available. So I think closing the borders at the beginning of a pandemic would have been preferable, and then once the government could have secured enough tests, then they can start testing people coming into the UK, and then send them back if they've got a positive COVID test, but which they've only started doing now a few weeks ago, which is much too late. And even if you have a positive COVID test in the UK and you're coming into the UK, you'll just be fined. You won't be sent back, which I just think is like legal bribery. So that's quite ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah, I also agree with that, but I think early COVID border closures, like I said, I don't think many people take it seriously. So again, the public is something they also have to take into account on that. Felix.
So I've got two international comparisons here. Two countries that did close their borders and did have competent leaders. So first of all, New Zealand. It's an island just like ours. Urban population has more. It has a higher percentage of urban population. It has it relies more heavily on tourists. It has 770,000 pounds per million, and we have 670,000 pounds per million on tourists. It has the exact same GDP per capita as us, so it's a pretty similar country, but it's had 0 deaths in September, and we've got the highest death rate in the world, or we did a few weeks ago. So that is a comparison of, and they closed their borders straight away, and they're an island. Most islands have done very well during this pandemic, but we have done absolutely terribly. It's the same with South Korea. If you want to look at the statistics, you can just look them up online, but they're very, again, very similar in terms of age and population density, but it has one of the least amount of deaths in the world, and it closed its borders straight away. So I think closing our borders straight away would have made a massive difference. Look at South Korea is like in Asia, so it's a lot more susceptible to straight away to a big spike, because it was near to China, and more people are going to be passing through South Korea to China. So it made sense for them to close their borders. So why did it not make sense for us to close our borders? Because to me, it just doesn't make sense why we didn't close our borders, because it's just it makes sense, right? Like, no cases can get in if no people can get in.
Yeah, I think with the UK and Ireland, the point you made though is that many of the governments tend to make now more hand-in-hand decisions, close borders, lockdowns at similar times, because of obviously that hard land border with Northern Ireland. But I think with the cases with Ireland and the UK being so drastically different, I think that might also have a bit to play with the public in that sense. Cameron.
Yeah, well, what I want to say first of all, as I said already, I kind of agree. It seems a sensible idea to me that the borders would have been closed, but I want to pick up on a couple of the international comparisons there, because the key thing, and I know that Felix has made another point out of this that I'll come onto a bit later, the population density of New Zealand is 18 people per kilometre squared. The population density in England is 432 people per kilometre squared. Massive difference. And I know that we have a similar population density to some Asian countries, because that's a point that Felix has made quite a few times in recent weeks.
South Korea,
yes,
which I also compared South Korea as well, because I wanted to show two different sides of the story. New Zealand was not about the population density; it was about how we the reliant on tourism, and also the island point as well. So it was not about population density. And if you look at South Korea, it has got the same population density.
I'm responding to your point in which you're making a direct comparison when it comes to the death rate. And I'm talking about population density within that sense. Now, when we're talking about the comparisons between the UK and the Asian countries, the difference there is that the Asian countries had the experiences with the SARS pandemic that automatically put them in a far better position than us when combating a similar disease. And perhaps you could say we didn't do enough to get an understanding of the SARS pandemic in Asia, and perhaps that left us a little bit unprepared. But I wanted to pick up on a couple of those international comparisons. I think it's important to have all the context that's possible to have when you're looking at those.
Yeah, I think both of you raised really good points there. And just before we move on to a slightly different topic, Daniel.
So what I think a lot of European countries have done wrong is they've been more reactionary than proactivity or something. They've had something happen, so a rise in cases, and then they've reacted to it. But what I think really governments should try and do is see a few weeks before a big rise happens and lock down and that can save so many more lives. And stop. We saw in New Zealand, they locked down early. They had a strong lockdown, and they shut the borders. So I think governments really need to stop reacting, and and be one step above, like the virus. If you get what I mean, they should not have to react. They should. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to be moving on to final major points. This week, Joe Biden was inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States of America. He succeeded Donald Trump, and some of his instance changes that he made within his first night. He ended the travel ban for Muslim majority countries. He halted the construction of the border wall and rejoined the Paris Climate Agreements, from which we saw an interesting tweet from Senator Ted Cruz. Might edit it over the screen now. He revoked the permit for the Keystone Pipeline, which carried oil from Canada to Alaska, destroying many native reservations. 100-day national mask mandates. Undocumented immigrants will be counted in the census, and a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, with 18% going to the vaccination program. And he aims to get 1 million vaccinated daily. So, we got a lot going. Felix, do you want to start us off then?
Yeah, sure. I thought that tweet from Ted Cruz was very amusing. If you haven't seen it, he says that we should be putting Pittsburgh over Paris when talking about the Paris Agreement. Unfortunately, the Paris Agreement does not correlate anything to do with Paris, apart from the fact it was signed in Paris. So I think Ted Cruz might have to go back to Harvard Law School for that one. But I think it was a great day for America, a really great day and a turning point. But I think what's going to be interesting in the next few months, we're going to see the first post-populist leader. We'll eventually see it in the UK once Boris Johnson moves on. But we see the first populist, post-populist prime minister. So I think it's going to be really interesting on how Biden goes about his presidency. Because if we look at Trump, it's been very it's not been about like budget. It's not been about politics, really. It's been basically a reality TV show for the last 4 years, with that great ending of him flying out to the sound of "I Did It My Way," which was no TV producer could have made that more perfect. I just think it's going to be very interesting, especially with the dynamic of Biden. He's quite grey, boring, I think, compared to Donald Trump. And I think it's going to be very interesting on how he goes about it. Because if you look at the inauguration day on Wednesday, it was just him signing papers, basically. That was all that was really going on. And I think a lot of the Trump supporters will have been very bored by that. So I think it's going to be very interesting how he goes about his presidency, whether he goes about with a bit more like TV show kind of mentality, or he plays it like he has done 30 years in Washington. It's going to be very interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I liked that link to a reality TV show with the finale of people raiding the Capitol and the grand ending of his relatives crying as he exited the plane in Florida, I think it was. And we'll start with Jose.
Well, first, I just want to respond to Felix quickly. Trump you can argue he may have been a reality TV show, but I feel you can't argue that it was a reality TV show when he has the best relations between all the nations in the Middle East. Be honest with yourselves, have you ever seen that? He didn't enter a single wall in his 4 years there. First president in 40 years, I think it was. Yeah, also he has the best relations with North Korea. But I'll be honest very quickly, although I liked what some of the stuff Trump did, I think Biden is setting a good image for himself, going against a lot of what the bad stuff Trump did, which I quite like. I think joining the Paris Agreement isn't a bad idea. I quite like the idea, but I'm going to be honest. I think Joe Biden's probably one of the most uninspiring people I've ever seen, apart from Mike Pence. He's just such a boring man. I don't trust Joe Biden one bit either, because I think in 1987, he was forced out of the election. He was forced out of running to be the Democrat candidate for the 1989 election because
88.
it was found. Yeah, 88. Sorry, because it was found he plagiarized a British politician's whole speech. I mean, am I supposed to trust the man who did that? I know you're going to argue, oh, he's changed this, he's changed that. Well, I still don't believe I should ever be trusting a man who did this. However, I just hope it goes well. The whole of his speech was about unity. So I'm going to wait to see. I want to see in 4 years' time, though, after 4 years, how much the media has pestered him. Because I know almost all of the media is just completely left bias. They're just going to go completely easy on Joe Biden and say, oh, you know what a hero. They're going to treat him like the saint that he isn't. So I'm just going to be completely interested to see how that goes. Trump was completely murdered by the media, but then Joe Biden, I think he'll go to the toilet on his own and the media will hail him higher than God.
You raise a very interesting point about credibility, I think, because it was fact-checked, the amount of lies that Donald Trump made in his presidency, and there were a total of 30,000 mistruths, or 21.
But I never said that Trump. But I never said Trump that was trustworthy. I told you when I came on the podcast for the first time 2 weeks ago. Trump was not a man I liked too much. A lot of the stuff he did was good, but I agree with Felix somewhat the reality TV show. But we're talking about Biden here, and what I'm saying about Biden is I'm never going to trust a man who completely copied a speech when he's running for president. That just shows he's immature, and if he doesn't have the ability to write his own speech, I don't know if I'm ever going to trust him.
I think I would trust him more than Donald Trump based on the evidence that's been given as of recent times. But Felix, who is pretty hard Biden supporter, would like to respond.
I'm not a Biden supporter, no, because I don't agree with a lot of his policy and his politics. He would not be my preferred candidate. But he's going to bring the nation together, and I think that's what the US needs. But I really want to fact check what you just said there. If you talk about the peace and the Middle East, peace in the Middle East, do you know what came with that signing of the deals? He sold them arms. He sold them arms so they can start a war with somebody else. So that's just not true. And then, the fake news, no, that's just a.
But I never said fake news. You're not listening. I said the media was pestering him constantly.
Left-wing bias. All right. Sorry, I'll quote you directly. Left-wing bias. Where is the left-wing bias? I said. Where is the Fox News? Fox News does this very, very interesting thing. So they get Trump feeds basically information directly to Fox News. Fox News will then present all these lies and conspiracy theories, and then because Fox News is a reputable source, people like CNN and ABC and people like that will then jump onto those things, and then it gets into the mainstream media, like Joe Biden's son's emails and things like that. Just complete lie, just getting into the media. So I just can't agree with your.
What I find interesting though is I forgot who it was. I think it's the press secretary of Joe Biden, when she was answering questions. All the questions were very easy. When she left, everybody was like, "Okay, thank you." When Trump answers questions. He answers them, he leaves, and everyone's still pestering him. I think because I'm expecting to see that for Joe Biden. If I was someone in America who completely supported Trump the whole time, I would be extremely angry if I saw Joe Biden being left off easily by all these people.
But maybe if he treated people with a little bit of respect and a bit of dignity. If you look at did you see Dr. Fauci yesterday at the briefing? He looked so relaxed, and he said, "I'm feeling a lot better after Trump." Trump treats people badly. He has no respect. That's why he gets torn apart by the media. And because he calls them, why would you not be torn apart if you're calling CNN fake news and you're saying, no, you can't have a question? I mean, of course he's going to get pestered and get torn apart.
Is it not his human right to avoid a question?
If Biden will not lie 30,000 times, and that is a guarantee. Therefore, he's not going to be torn apart.
Well, he may not lie, but he might plagiarize a lot of speeches.
His job is to get the truth out. And if he's lying all the time...
Biden doesn't even know how to say 30,000 words.
No, but why are you attacking him for his stutter? At least he's a good politician, and he won't lie as nearly as much as Trump has, and he won't cause the environmental damages. He won't
fall asleep before he's able to.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Name stuff Joe Biden did while he's the senator of Delaware. One of them, the crime bill, which has been known to be a racist one.
Yeah.
Tell me
yeah,
now.
And I take that point. Yeah, I do, and I condemn him for that. Completely condemn him for that. And like I said at the start, he was not my first choice candidate. And look, he's not perfect either, but I think he will lie less than Trump. He won't bring in racist policy to target people for their religion, and he won't build walls like Mexico, and he won't lie. And it's that simple for me. I don't know if it is for everyone else, but for me, it is that simple. Trump is a liar, and he cannot be trusted, and he lacks basic understanding of things. He has the mind. I think I personally would get a better IQ score than Donald Trump.
Donald Trump's also very rich, so he must be good at something.
Yeah.
I'd just like to intervene, lads, and just I think we should conclude by saying it's not an argument of Biden versus Trump, because we have Biden now. The question is, are we going to hold Biden to account, even to a similar degree of extent to Trump's? Because we cannot let Biden make some policy that may be looked against, and then he doesn't get held to account just because of left-wing bias.
Well, he will. He will if he.
But that's the whole point. The whole point is just we just hope that he gets held to account, because Trump's been held to account a lot by the media, and you've said they've been pestering him. We just hope they don't let Biden get away. But do you think Biden will get away with a lot of stuff?
If Biden brings in blatantly racist policies that target people for their religion, if Biden lies 30,000 times, and if Biden leaves the Paris Agreement and completely abandons all climate change work in America, then I expect him to be held as much to account as Donald Trump.
But he won't be. That's the simple answer. I think we can already tell from day 2 or 3.
He won't be held accountable because he's not an idiot.
He won't.
Exactly.
Because he doesn't
if he
insult the media for no reason.
He'll be held.
Right, let me tell you something. You know, Donald Trump set up a plan to send, I think it was $1 billion to poorer black neighborhoods to help them get out of that. The media didn't cover it once, yet it was a good plan. I didn't see CNN reporting it.
They reported it. They reported on it. All right, so they did report on it. So this left-wing bias is not there. It's fake news. It's fake news. It's not fake news. It's as simple as that.
But I didn't call it fake news. I'm just saying it's biased to the left. We've already seen that.
Because you put it a bit nicer than Donald Trump has, and a bit more intelligently. It doesn't make a difference. There is no left-wing bias. They are trying to get the facts out, and that is what a good journalist should do.
Yeah, I think it's important that we restore a little bit of calm and sensibility to this debate, because I fear as though it's got a little bit heated. And I think actually the debate that's being had here is one that is in the past. The Biden-Trump debate is over. We now have Biden as the president. Okay, so let's move on, accept that, whether you were a supporter of Biden or a supporter of Trump, because the last thing America needs is people here in the UK arguing about American presidents. They've done enough of that in the last year. So I want to talk a bit more about actually the UK and our relations with the US when it comes to the orders that have been signed, because I was very concerned a few weeks ago, and I actually wrote an article on this about how concerned I was about what Biden would mean for the UK's relationship with the US, and I did think that Trump would be the better option in terms of retaining the special relationship. But having a look at these executive orders that Biden has put in this week, I actually think that it's actually bringing America much more in line with our policies, both when it comes to COVID and when it comes to climate change. For example, of course, we are part of the Paris Agreement, and we are a big supporter of it. And I think this is a good sign. Biden is going to be much more aligned to us in terms of climate change. And also, when we're talking about the masks being made mandatory in government lands, that's a step in the right direction. It's also a step in the direction of the action that the UK government has been taking over the last year. We've been strict when it comes to masks, when it comes to social distancing, when it comes to washing hands. And I think that's a very important point to make. So I've now kind of been persuaded in the last few weeks that perhaps Biden is going to be a better thing, both for the global interdependence as a whole, and also for our direct special relationship with America.
Yeah, I think restoring international, I guess you could say, peace, I guess, like with the UK and with the EU is going to be a big part of Biden's 4 or even 8 years possibly, because I think, I'm not sure how credible the news source was, but it did say that Boris Johnson was slightly relieved that Biden was elected in, and obviously the EU head commissioner was visibly seen on the media as being proud of the movements taken to reach on Paris Agreement and just happy about the election. So, okay, yeah, Piers, you got anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just express my general thought on Mr. Biden. Well, I can see him as being a Jimmy Carter type leader. He's a weak leader in general who's going to be easily pushed around by the Senate and the House, and controlling them is not even necessarily a good thing for him, because they'll be able to push in any moderate agendas that they want, but if Biden disagrees with them, they'll still go through because of the control that the Democratic Party has rather than Biden has. He's too old, first of all. I know Trump's very old as well, but all of the I'm going to say most big politicians are too old and out of touch with society in general to be running any superpowers in the world, and I just think it's regrettable that not only, well, I mean, I think it's what's most regrettable is that the Democrats chose him for his choice as their choice in 20.
Yeah, he did say in his acceptance speech when he surpassed the required votes that he wanted to heal the US. He didn't see red or blue states, and that he wanted it to be the United States. And
well, on the unifying part, I don't think America will ever be as unified as Europe and other places. Their politics have shifted so far to the extremes, and what I think Biden really needs to do now is try and fix everything that Trump has done wrong in the last 4 years, and then it'll prove to Republicans that Trump didn't work, and that the Democrats are a good choice, really.
Yep, I guess that's a nice way to look at it and
yeah,
finish off.
and hopefully we can unite, because we did see that many Republicans were opposed to Biden. We're still seeing them say, "Not my president."
I'm doing the outro here. It just cut out. But thank you very much to Tommy for hosting. I'll be back next week on the 1st of February when we will be interviewing Monica Harding, who stood against Dominic Raab and nearly won that seat. So that is going to be a very exciting interview. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, like this video. And as I said at the start, we're interviewing Sarah Olney, who's a Liberal Democrat MP. That will be on the 15th of February. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Click here for a specially recommended video from YouTube.